All right, let's get it started here. Today is September 26th, so we're almost into October. So this is officially the final of the NADOG Days of Summer series that Brian and I started back in May. After this one, Brian and I put our heads together and come up with a new concept for a new series of webinars as well. If there's anyone out there who would like to present on one of these or has something you want to share with the group, let me know, let Brian know, and we'll be happy to get you scheduled to come on and chat with us as well. So Brian, I'll let you introduce yourself and we'll get rolling here.
Hello. Awesome. Thanks, Jim. I'm Brian Dawson. I joke that I'm Jim's sidekick, but actually a former colleague and friend of Jim's. I think at this
Since we're talking Batman, you're the Robin. And I'm the Batman,
am I Robin? I was the Robin. Today I'm going to claim, well, I can't today, I won't. Yes, I'm Jim's Robin. But about 20 years in DevOps, consider myself a DevOps, a technologist and a DevOps practitioner. And I'm looking forward to this conversation with our guest, Ankur Trivedi, who is the Global DevOps Practice Lead at Digital.ai. And today we will be speaking with him about scaling DevOps, focusing on a real-world use case with GE's journey with Digital.ai, my favorite way to talk about DevOps. And we have some interesting topics lined up for you. So Ankur, thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thanks, Brian. Thanks, John.
Cool. Well, I think I'll continue. Let's get right in. Let's get ready to rumble. I want to hear more about your story. I know I caught a piece yesterday. To kick it off, you've worked closely with GE for a number of years. Yep. I think tracking since 2016, so about 8 years. Yep. I was hoping you could kick us off by walking us through some key milestones that you saw GE achieve over their 15-year DevOps transformation.
Absolutely. So I also have been, around, I have around 20 years of experience. So basically the first about 10 years of my career, I was a developer, right? So I was a developer at Cisco, doing product development. And then there I was actually trying out some, DevOps practices. So as a developer, I was also kind of, helping set up the build framework, etc. Right. So that got me really interested into DevOps, and that's what brought me into Zebia Labs back then. So at Zebia Labs, I started my career as a solution architect and professional services engineer. So because of that role, I got involved with a lot of different customers, right? So GE Vernova being one of them.
Okay.
GE Vernova was at the time on a journey of their DevOps transformation. So the journey had started like before me, getting involved with them in terms of the product, the Zebia Labs product implementation. So the first thing that GE started was around in 2011. So GE Vernova, what they do is they basically, build softwares that gather a lot of insights from the power plants, right? So all the major power plants in the United States and, outside the United States as well. GE, Gas and Power, former GE Gas and Power, now GE Vernova. Their software actually gathers a lot of insights and metrics, analytics from the power plant so that they can perform better. That's one. And also it is like auto optimization within those power plants as well that they can remotely deploy. So in those softwares, they were very good at building those softwares, but then of course the build pipeline was less than ideal. So they brought in the build tool initially in 2011. It took about a 2-year transformation. So between 11 to 13, they basically had the build setup, automated build setup for all the analytics that they deploy out there.
Curious, what build tool did they bring in to get started?
They brought in Jenkins.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was kind of, a 2-year journey for them to kind of implement Jenkins for all of their, different analytics softwares, different other software that are helping the analytics as well. The next 2 years, they were still kind of finding it slow. That though the build is automated, still the deployment was very manual process. So that's when they engaged with ZBA Labs between I want to say 13 to 15. And then they automated all deployment with the help of ZBA Labs Deploy, now Digital.ai Deploy.
Can I jump in before you continue on the journey,
Yeah,
just to get
sure.
context? Can you talk a bit about how the initiative initiated? Was this coming out of a central group? Did they have an equivalent of what we now call platform ops? Or, was it dev driven? Any background that you could give there before you continue on the journey?
Yeah, the very interesting question. So it was essentially, dev driven. So the person that I worked with the most, he was in one of the, software development teams. So he was a software development manager who was managing one of these analytic teams.
Okay.
And he was not very happy with the way things were going in terms of, how the software was built, how the software was deployed, as well as provisioned across all the customers of GE, right? So he kind of took an independent role. He actually left his management position. He basically became a principal engineer, and then he was kind of championing these practices.
Wow.
And then he eventually, kind of set up a horizontal, which was a center of excellence, which was, helping other analytic teams to, use these practices. So he ended up actually owning that COE, and then he's managing all these tools today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next part of the journey was after deploy, they actually, brought in the release automation software from ZBA Labs as well. It was called Excel Release, now Digital.ai Release. And with that, they automated the process of, building, means right after build, what all different stages the software goes through. They automated everything with, Digital.ai Release. So it would trigger the build process. It would trigger the deployment process into a certain environment. Then, some testing process would be triggered. And then based on, the change management that the customer has set up, they would deploy a new version of that software into the production environment. So that adoption again took about 2 years for all the different application teams. And that gave them a lot of optimization. The release software actually gave them a lot of benefit in terms of visibility, that where exactly are the bottlenecks in the entire process, where they should invest more automation, what is the percentage of releases that are running into issues, and then where they should invest more automation. So with that, they saw that, okay, the releases are actually are not the bottleneck really, but they are getting a lot of after release defects, right? So with that, they then moved ahead and invested into observability.
Okay.
And then very, very interesting use cases that I'll talk about later around observability and self-healing that they have implemented. So they're still on a journey wherein it is, again, it's a continuous process, but then they have really optimized from the way where they were in 2011. Today, the process, just for comparison, from a 2 months development cycle, now they are to a deploying every 7 days. So they really reduced the release velocity. They basically increase their release velocity, reduce the time to market.
Well, and I'll real quick, Jim, I'd like you to maybe take the next question, but just to pause for a quick minute. So it sounds like a little self-plug. I'd sort of developed this concept of the 4 quadrants of DevOps maturity based on what I observe and ultimately prescribed. And what I observe is a lot of times teams start with CI on the path to scale. They then move downstream at a team level. That point, oftentimes it's then proved to the organization. Now you got to move into the upper 2 quadrants of growing it into an organization-wide practice. It sounds like that was the GE journey. And They now have kind of successfully are in the middle of working with digital AI to make it a multi-team organization-wide practice, like you say, a horizontal practice. I guess one question I'd have is that the journey that they took? And as they move up into what I'll call the fourth quadrant, how many teams are you guys supporting on the platform?
So right now, I think all the analytics, so they have about 300 people developing all these different analytic groups. And a total number of applications is around 70 applications that they are deploying with this. The next part of the journey is they are now working with digital AI to gather insights from all the different parts of the SDLC. So right now digital AI has been helping them. Digital AI started helping them with the deployment piece, and then the release orchestration piece, everything right of source code commit. But then what we are now doing is basically implementing a data lake solution. And in that data lake solution, they are bringing in the planning data, the entire data from release, and the change management data as well. So with that, what they'll then understand is from the moment a feature is planned, how much time does it take for that feature to start delivering business value to the end customer? And then within this process, where are the bottlenecks, right? So they can actually measure their cycle time, bottlenecks within each process. So is how much time testing is taking, how much time different types of testing is taking, what is the rate of new pull request being created, and how soon the pull requests get merged, etc. So they would gather a lot of insights. They're in the process of actually trying out that technology right now. And once it happens, they can again they would get better pointers in terms of okay, where to invest into more automation.
Thank you, Ankur. We got a chance to speak together yesterday for a little bit as we were prepping for today. And during that, you did talk about some use cases that had a significant impact on everything that GE was doing, or the GE operations that you were focused on. Do you mind getting into that a little bit and talking about those? I think there were three that you really keyed in on, and I think that would be helpful for everyone to hear about.
Absolutely. So I think probably everybody on the call, and if you are tracking if you are in the DevOps space, that what release management is. These are typical use cases, right? But what surprised me on this journey with GE was some very interesting usages of the release management tools that we offer. At the end of the day, the release management tool, the pipeline tools are essentially workflow tools, right? Be it from digital AI or any other vendor, they are essentially pipeline tools, right? At GE, what they have done is they have all these different sites. So I talked about the core use case. They have the analytic softwares running in these different power plants, right? And if this software actually goes down, if there is downtime, it causes downtime in the power plant, because they are basically gathering these analytics using which some engineers in the power plant would actually do some corrective actions. So if that analytics software is not working, these power plant engineers are running blind, and then the outages could cost it could be in multi-billion-dollar outage, because the power plant is then serving like multiple different hundreds of customers, right? So they really wanted automated and self-healing capability if the analytics software ever goes down. So what they did was they basically they call it the OSM agent. So it's basically part of the Dynatrace software. So they implemented the Dynatrace software. The Dynatrace software would actually give them the monitoring feedback that if the analytics software is down. And then on top of that, within the release pipeline, they created self-healing actions based on the type of event that is coming from the analytic, right? So there are typical issues like, say, for instance, the disk space is full in one of their, analytic softwares. and then some sort of cleanup has to be done, right? So they for these general type of problems, which their support group was handling, they basically created these automated workflows. And using these automated workflows, they saw that the triage time for the support groups, which was taking, say, 45 minutes to an hour to fix these issues, it dropped to 3 minutes because it is an automated action based on the type of event the flow just triggers. And then they really saw major improvement in the downtime from any of these.
So let me real quick, and I know we can't spend a ton of time on it, but this is really cool. Let me make sure I understand it. So one, what's really neat that as a DevOps evangelist, I like to talk about is, look, it's not just business. It's not just dollars. As we've learned with the extreme heat and extreme cold, they have people's lives in their hands, right?
Exactly.
So developing this process is not some abstract thing, but it sounds like, if I understand correctly, their build and release process that they've built with Digital.ai will deploy this critical analytics software.
Yes.
They are monitoring that. If that analytics software goes down or if something is awry, they're then able to re-trigger a deployment or a patch or some form of additional push to bring it back up and mitigate downtime. Is that
absolutely
right?
Absolutely.
Wow, that's neat. That's neat.
Yep. And another use case then they realized was, so this was a very neat use case that was implemented, and it impacted the downtime and really helped the support groups triage these issues faster. Another use case they had was how to commission and upgrade these analytic softwares. So at the place where the analytic software is implemented in the power plants, they had to commission some hardware on top of which the analytic software would run. So for that, they would actually send out an engineer. This engineer would then install the hardware, commission some sort of operating system on top of that, and then the automated process would then deploy the analytic software. So you can call it a typical professional services engineer going on site and then doing some actions, right?
Right.
They created now a workflow with Digital.ai release, so that particular commissioning can be completely automated. So what they have done is they would actually send out some instructions to the power plant, and they would plug in the device, and then all the provisioning can be done remotely, right? So that was another very neat use case, because the professional services engineer who is going on site, they are kind of triggering a standard operating procedure, and now that standard operating procedure can be done remotely, automated. And then on top of that, if something goes wrong, we plug in as part of the standard operating procedure, we plug in the monitoring as well. So if there is some problem in the standard operating procedure, the monitoring would pick it up and actually self-heal it. Right. So that was another very, very interesting use case, which is again saving them a ton of money in terms of saving the commissioning engineers time, as well as reducing the human error as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for covering those, Ankur. I think you have a really unique perspective because you've been on this project for so long with the same customer. So I'm sure you learned quite a bit, right? Or quite a bit of like, this is what we should do, this is what you shouldn't do, especially. Can you spend it? We still have like 9 or 10 minutes left here. Sure. Can you spend some of that time talking about some key takeaways or learnings that you can share with everybody? Like what were the challenges to look out for? What kind of successes did you have? If you have any advice, do's and don'ts, any of that stuff that you can share with us from all this experience.
Absolutely. So I think one learning that we had along the way was we were creating all these very interesting workflows, and I would actually give complete credit to the GE team. I was basically facilitating, the product expertise, but they knew the business process. So they came up with a lot of very, interesting ideas in how they could actually use the digital AI technology. But what we realized very soon is we were creating a lot of these interesting workflows. How do we manage these workflows? So, all these best practices that we are implementing in SDLC, how do we implement those best practices in the workflow management itself, right? So we went ahead and then implemented all these workflows also as code. And then deployment of these workflows also is happening through one of the workflows, right? So it's kind of, very interesting use case again of, easier management of the technology that is powering all these other business processes. The second very cool thing is, again, I would actually divide these key learnings into three parts of people, process, and technology. So in the people part was definitely very, very important. As I said, the person championing this effort, he came from one of the teams implementing it. So he had really good understanding of the development processes. And then he ended up creating this horizontal. So he implemented this bi-weekly feedback loop wherein it was not top-down pushed that, if there is a workflow that is being developed for all analytic teams, it was done in cycles. So it was, MVP was actually given to all these analytic teams. And then based on their bi-weekly feedback, it was constantly updated and, made available very quickly. The updates were made available very quickly. So that really drove the adoption within all these 70 different application teams, because they really felt that they are being heard, right? Their feedback is being taken, and it actually became idea factory as well. So they would come up with all these analytic teams, they would come up with very unique ideas as well, which could be beneficial for all the teams and create these standard process workflows. So I think this was definitely one example where I saw a lot of ideas coming from crowdsourced ideas, basically.
Right. And then in the third pill, you said people, process, tools.
Yeah.
In the tools category, were there key learnings or challenges?
Yeah. So in the technology part, right, I think the pipeline team was responsible for tool selection. So they selected, Jenkins for their CI. They selected Deploy for their deployment. But then in the tool selection as well, they looked at feedback from all these different teams. At the same time, they had kind of created a checklist of scalability and ease of adoption, right? So they really kind of did a proof of concept for all the different types of technologies that they would deploy. And then based on that feedback, they did the tool selection. They really don't have the use cases in terms of, hybrid cloud, but yeah, I think all those inputs, because they kind of took into account all those inputs, it really helped them in the right tool selection.
Can I ask, and that's interesting. I love one that you said people, process, and technology, or people, process, and tools. Sort of the holy trinity of DevOps that I don't think can be ignored.
A lot of people ignore different pieces of that.
But you need three legs for the stool to stand. You take one of them out, right? And it's a balancing act that's going to fail. I was gonna say, well, just to like, I'll call out which of those areas, people, process, and technology, or tools, did you and the team find the biggest challenge, and what was that?
Yeah, I think I would say people is the biggest challenge. So if you manage to, win over the people aspect, I think everything else follows, right? Because they got the people part right. Then the people helped establishing the right processes and selecting the right technology. So, like, I think early in my career, because I came from the development background, I basically over-indexed on the technology part. But over the years, I have realized from experience with all these big customers that the people part is the most important part.
And in that order too, I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people I talk to is they do it in the opposite direction, right? They find a tool they really like, then they try to build a process around it or try to apply it to what they're doing, and then they try to get everybody on board. And if you do it the other way around, it not only makes it easier, obviously, right? If everyone's on board building the process and stuff, but once you have the people on board and the processes are built, now you know how to select the tools because you're going to find tools that fit into what you want to do and not doing it the other way around, trying to make what you do fit into the tool.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Well, I was curious as well, and then correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems like, and I actually think it's a pattern that could be followed, is that this was scaled out first in what are largely a homogeneous environment, right? Homogeneous teams, their end goal and what they're delivering is the same. I think you said you're going to look to expand beyond the analytics team now, where you're potentially running into the challenge of heterogeneous teams. Curious if, am I interpreting that right? Do you have any sort of comment around that and how to kind of cross that chasm of moving into heterogeneous environments?
No, so no, I think they kind of, what I meant by, so they already took care of the heterogeneous environment. So they adopted, those processes early on. How they tackle the issue of heterogeneous applications is they created different types of workflows. So the intention was to create minimal number of these workflows, right? And only create a different workflow if they really, if the business process was really different or if the technology was really different, right? So they already tackled with these different workflows the heterogeneous challenge. What I meant when I said that, they are now taking care of a bigger data set, they are now bringing in the planning data as well. So far, they have managed to kind of create these newer processes, everything right of source code commit, right? So, from source code commit, the build, the deploy, and, now the observability as well is in the pipeline, but the planning data is sitting in a silo, right? So now they are actually putting in a data lake in which the planning data also comes in. And in the context of an application, then they can really do, say, predictive analysis that, in my last, say, 1 year worth of releases, this is how much time we took for a business feature to take it into production, right? Now, based on that data, what is the predictability that if I now plan a feature today, how much time would it take for me to deliver it for my customers?
Awesome. Key clarification for me. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool. I want to move into a Q&A in just a second here. But before we do, any final thoughts or takeaways to add for everybody from either one of you?
I want to try to interpret, as I've done, what I hear from Ankur. And first, Ankur, thank you. I think it's really important for all of us looking to achieve this as sort of as practitioners at whatever level to be able to reference real world examples, especially with an organization like GE. And, what I've sort of heard is to go back to is this is achievable, even in a complex environment like GE. It is incremental. They started with a particular point need, but once they got buy-in with the people, and once you get buy-in with the people, that then gives you the ability to incrementally improve. Start with the source of the pain, expand out end to end, and then either after or while you're doing that, keep in consideration, as we discussed, this idea of how do we scale it across multiple teams? Because you are always going to have heterogeneous tool, tech stacks, app stacks, and or that technology is always going to evolve. So if you want to successfully scale throughout the process, you need to be thinking about how you address multiple teams, multiple stacks, multiple environments. I also hear that once you get there, then you should have a stable and steady foundation for continuous improvement. Yeah. So I just want to underscore that for those people that haven't embarked on the journey yet. And I think you walking us through that is extremely valuable. Any other final thoughts from you before we jump to Q&A?
Yeah, no, I think the only thing I would add is I think probably a lot of listeners would have a different type of landscape wherein there is already pockets of automation happening into different parts of the organization, right? So there is, say CI tools, but more than one CI tools being used within the organization. And then they would have to go through a process of rationalization of tool of sorts, right? So I think it is very important to get, something like, a data layer wherein they can understand and make data-driven decisions that what all different type of, technologies are being used. They can start with minimum level of standardization, wherein and that's from one of my other implementations. We did standardized on one or two things and then left rest of the things to the people, wherein they are creating their own release processes. And then eventually we would end up with a few different release processes which we would eventually standardize on, right? So I think the people aspect, the culture is very important, wherein if you change too much, you would get a lot of pushback. What they had going for GE was they did not have all these tools already, so they kind of eased into the transformation. But that may not be the case for a lot of our listeners here. They already might be, because DevOps is now 20 years old, so they already would have definitely a lot of level of automation.
You would think.
Great point. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Ankur, so much. I think that I'd really love to do another session where we just talk about the people side, because that's extremely impressive. That's easier to do. Well, it's easier, a lot easier to do if you've got a small team, right? That's starting off and you start building those processes and building that culture from the ground up. But when you come into an existing team of hundreds, thousands of people, how do you get them all marching to the same drum, right? And how do you build a culture around that to get them motivated to do the things that they need to do? And super impressive. Right, my dog, she was sleeping the whole event, but decided to pop up now. But we are going to transition to live Q&A with Ankur. If you're watching us on YouTube, this is where we say goodbye to you. Everyone else, stay on. We're going to go to Q&A. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. We'll add new content every couple of weeks. And like I said, Brian and I are going to come up with a new concept for the next series of events. And make sure you join NADOG as well. It's nadog.com/join to get invited to these and to all of the local events and things. And Ankur, yeah, looking forward to seeing you out in the wild, probably at the next NADOG event we'll be together.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for tuning in, everybody.
Drop knowledge, pure delight. DevOps chatter, turn the volume high. Brian and Jim bringing summer vibes.